Hello, people of planet Earth and beings of other worlds. This is Christopher from Sun Ra Arkive. It ain't necessarily so. From the Wonder Inn, Chicago, Illinois, 1960. That was released by Atavistic. It's part of the Unheard Music series. This is a tune I always go back to. It kind of speaks to the heart of what made me think that getting started with some live streams while I'm on holiday here might be worth exploring, see how many of you are out there, see what kind of interest there is in this kind of discussion. Because it ain't necessarily so. The things that you're liable to read in the Bible ain't necessarily so. So I've been focusing on Sun Ra's esoteric song titles. Things dealing in spirituality, inner and outer dimensions, ancient civilizations, spiritual beings like angels and demons, things along those lines. Something that I've always thought about concentrating on a little bit more because it's an interest of mine. What I think originally was maybe a parallel interest, but that really drew me to Sun Ra, the fact that he was interested in studying and communicating about these topics, along with the music and everything else about Sun Ra and the Arkestra that really resonates with me because I'm fascinated by those topics. And part of what the power of Sun Ra is for me and his being here on planet Earth as the musician, band leader, composer Sun Ra is the kind of totality of his person, of his being, and the fact that he was so spiritually minded. And being someone who's spiritually minded too, I always think about what his path was. I think it's pretty clear why he was here, what he was sent here to do, and his awareness of that, his embrace of his mission in that lifetime. But we all kind of have like different paths as far as our awareness and when we start to wake up and what kind of questions we ask ourselves. And I have total respect for Sun Ra as a advanced and enlightened individual. And my view on Sun Ra's kind of pronouncement of his being, his persona, his name, his origin, I have come to just take at face value. I don't question it. What Sun Ra believed, what Sun Ra communicated, I just accept it for what it is, respect his intention and his perspective, his experience, and that even if I might not be in a place where I can understand or have the same experience, who am I to doubt? Who am I to question? And just learn from him in that way. I think the gut reaction of kind of popular society is to just dismiss him as a kook, or one of the tinfoil hat brigade if you don't think along those lines. But I think that's incredibly short-sighted and disrespectful. So I always think about Sun Ra's spiritual journey as a being. And obviously he communicated about these topics through his songs, not just the vibrations of the music he composed, but in the song titles. And I often wonder, in addition to a lot of things, what the formulation of his communication was. At what point of advancement of his understanding of or confidence in these subject matters did he write about them, right? So part of the live streams and why I'm doing this is that I'm a life learner. I am not an expert in anything. I continually am trying to let go of that, as well as the idea of ego and ownership over knowledge and subject matter. And this is really just about sharing my study and my experience. It's not about a professional and polished delivery. It's not about subscribers. It's not about anything like that. It's about the fact that I have these periods of deep immersion in all things Sun Ra. And this is just a different way to document it. Instead of doing all the research, getting it all perfect, and then sharing it out via a produced podcast or PDF or something like this, this is more about sharing the conversation as it happens, the discovery, the dialogue, before I've come to any conclusion, if I ever reach a conclusion. And I'm wondering, with Sun Ra's career as a musician and his development as a spiritual being and a scholar and a learner, at what point did he start to interject these spiritual, esoteric, occult, ancient ideas into his work? Was it when he reached a point where he thought that he had it figured out, that he had a very crystallized idea of what he wanted to express in the concept? Right now, I'm thinking of words like Atlantis, Lemuria, Bimini. Or were his compositions a work in progress? Meaning that as he was discovering and learning about new topics, meditating on them, researching them, reading about them, were the songs composed when that process was happening, so that as opposed to being a final statement presented in the work, that they're a journey of discovery. And I'm thinking that the improvisational nature of his work, in addition to his compositional aspects of his work, might have part of the answer. That these topics, right? So, I mean, Bimini, Lemuria, Atlantis just popped into my mind. That is an example. Were those compositions thought about and notated after he had come to some awareness or conclusion or ideas, or were they channeled and improvised in the moment as he meditated on and tried to come to terms with the topics? So that, in a very long way, is kind of explaining my thought process on this topic, and why live streaming might be a good medium, right, to share. So Like I was just out walking my dog Maisie, and I do that 2 times a day. And as I walk, I listen to music, I listen to podcasts, I think, and that's a couple hours every day where I'm sitting having these ideas in real time, um, that I think maybe we could replicate in this space, where it's sharing thoughts and observations on a journey of discovery, as opposed to like an author or a documentarian um, presenting the journey and the thoughts after they've happened. And that this might be a useful way to make use of my patterns of energy around Sun Ra. So these esoteric topics might be a good starting place. And by way of kind of explaining what I just said, my phases of Sun Ra. So I've been a Sun Ra fan since 1991. And where I went to college at the University of Connecticut, a local DJ there on WHUS FM radio, which was the Yukon station, Richard Segan, who was a dear friend and my Sun Ra mentor. He had a live radio show every week, world music radio show called One World Radio. And as a part of that, there was about a 15-minute feature called Sun Ra's Cosmic Corner. And because of this and because of his advocacy for the group, he was instrumental in bringing the Sun Ra Arkestra, who at the time still had Sun Ra, June Tyson, John Gilmore, Jackson in the band. And by listening to that Sun Ra's Cosmic Corner radio show by Richard and seeing that concert in 1991, I was instantaneously made a lifelong uh, Sun Ra fan. And when I first discovered him and became friends with Richard, it was around the time of the Evidence CD reissues. So there was some press around Sun Ra, like the Rolling Stone review of those CDs. There were recordings for newbies like me that were a little bit more easily available than they would have been to an earlier generation of Sun Ra fans, meaning records that you had to search out, go to the concerts, buy out of Danny Ray Thompson's trunk or from Jackson at the bandstand or whatever. And that's when I became a fan, but I deeply immersed myself in it. It really, uh, it really caught my attention. Hey, Paul Cast, I'm so new at doing this. I didn't even see that someone was actually watching. So, you know, I think as we all know and will learn, the community around Sun Ra is very small. So I didn't anticipate even having a viewer. So, hey, Paul, thanks for joining. Um, and so that's 30 years ago now. And when I get into something, I go deep and I go fully down the rabbit hole. Music being the predominant creative or cognitive or spiritual love of my life. Those tend to be the things that I really get deeply into. And Sun Ra was one of those things. And, through the years of seeking out his records, trying to go see the band, gathering articles from old Downbeat magazines and Coda magazines, eventually, expanded into trading cassette tapes of live concerts and out of print Saturn LPs. And I would devote lots and lots of time to this over the years. And I would go so deep with these things that it was all consuming. Paul, you can relate to this and some of the topics that you and I talk about that brought us together now, we kind of devote the same kind of energy to. We go real deep and we put a lot of energy into it because I think we're trying to um, understand something on a very deep and total level, and it's beyond just the earthly concerns of the topic. We're trying, through the learning and through the topic, we learn something about ourselves and human nature and the human experience. And Sun Ra has been that for me. But I would get so deeply into it for sustained periods of times that after let's say a year, 2 years, 3 years, 5 years, I would get really burnt out and I would need to take a break. So I have these Sun Ra phases where it's all I will do and think about for a while, and then I need to take a break. I need to clear my thoughts, clear my psychic palette, get into other things, and I just kind of obey and go with that inner dialogue in my fandom. And hey, Worthy Madan, thank you for joining. Sun Ra is a guide for those in search for cosmic understanding. Absolutely. And welcome to you, brother or sister. And that's part of what we're going to share and talk about here, if there's any interest or value in it. So I've been on a long period here, kind of going in and out of these Sun Ra phases for the past few years, because it takes so much attention when I get into it. And I've been concerned with and dealing with other things that I haven't really had a deep Sun Ra period. And the older I get, they get more fleeting, where I'll go in real deep for 30, 60, 90 days, a year, and then I'll get out. But it's not like it's not a daily practice. I need to step away. And I'm having this feeling lately that I'm coming up on one of these periods of immersion. And in previous periods, there would have been collecting tapes, cassette tapes of the out of print, hard to find Saturns, concert tapes. There would have been going to the physical old school libraries, looking up, um, encyclopedia entries for Sun Ra, looking for old magazines, reviews, and Downbeat magazine, pulling out microfiche, looking for concert listings and concert reviews, and building a cassette tape library, building binders of photocopies from libraries. That would have been kind of a phase one. Working at a record store, trying to buy all of the CDs in the 90s that were in print worldwide. Um, and then that eventually, by the end of the 90s, kind of evolved into the Sun Ra Archive with a K. And just to make the distinction, there's the Sun Ra Archive, spelled traditionally Archive, that is run by the Sun Ra Estate LLC, Michael Anderson, Erwin Shusad. And that is not what this kind of personal study project, Sun Ra Archive with a K, is. They are a separate, distinct, and what's the right word? Pinnacle entity. They represent Sun Ra's recorded legacy and the wishes of the family and the estate. I'm just a fan. I am not for profit, always have been. I'm basically just sharing the journey as a learner. And in 98, as a professional graphic designer, I started taking all of the scans and photocopies from these, notebooks and ring binders and stuff, and started putting them together in designed PDFs. So this would, at the time, would have been called an e-zine. Shows you how social media and digital distribution has changed so much over the years. When PDFs were like a big deal in distribution, that I could take hundreds of pages and get them up somewhere on the internet for downloading. But I did, I think, 4 or 5 issues of Sun Ra Archive that were distributed online for free as a magazine, an e-zine that you could print out at home, in partnership with my friend Suso Navarrete and his temple website. Suso also at one point did the official Sun Ra Arkestra directed by Marshall Allen website. I'm not sure if he still is. I've fallen out of contact with Suso, but have the warmest feelings and respect for him. Kind of as my journey grew, and this was the days of mailing letters and tape lists before email, you know, um, I gathered a very small community of friends that would help me with these things, and Suso is a great example of that. And then, so 98, Sun Ra Archive, the PDF e-zine came out, in a desire to kind of share my studies in a nonprofit free way, preserve the legacy of the Arkestra, and hopefully make it easier for people that came after me to get up to speed more quickly, to kind of present the research in a curated but undistilled fashion for those that came after, so that they can maybe more quickly formulate it into books, documentaries, podcasts, etc. Because that period of just discovery and doing that initial research was very time consuming. But initially in my head, it was always going towards a bigger project that still hasn't uh, been realized. So 98, and then became friends with all of these wonderful email um, traders and mailing lists, like the Saturn mailing list, on listserv, Joe Modry, Robert Campbell, etc., and got a really good group of core friends that would communicate remotely, virtually via email, etc., and we would swap tapes and recordings, and cassettes had transitioned to CDRs, etc. And I spent years and years and hours doing this. I remember when I was designing and putting together the Sun Ra Archive e-zines, which are still available on sunrablogspot.com for download. I had insomnia, or at the time, or was so incredibly driven by this project that I couldn't sleep, and I would be awake at 2, 3, 4 in the morning, all alone in the still of the night doing this work, and I almost felt in a cosmic kind of way that I was working for Sun Ra. And I stuck with it, but I would have periods with my friends where we go really deep into gathering recordings, trying to document them, trying to get them all in one place, digitize them, share them with each other, make sure that what we had discovered was preserved on hard drives and disseminated, so that the next generations of people that came before would have this kind of library of knowledge to draw on, and wouldn't have to do some of the work that we did, in hopes that Sun Ra's message and music would be preserved and more easily accessible. Which kind of, brings us up to more recent years. So, social media got online with Facebook and stuff, and YouTube, and uploaded videos. And the Sun Ra community is very small, which has always I've always been split in my mind, logic wise, about it. Part of it surprises me that there's not more of us, that we're not more banded together in a community. And then on the other hand, it's totally obvious that Sun Ra is for a very select few. It's very challenging. It's very demanding. It's very esoteric. It demands your complete attention, and that it's not for everybody. So, of course, the group's going to be small, but kind of in the online social media um, realm, it makes it very hard to kind of have this discussion, because basically, at the end of the day, sometimes you feel like you're talking to yourself, which is okay as a learner, and you kind of accept that your journey is your own. You're by yourself. It's not about clicks, likes, shares, subscribers. But it makes it very hard to sustain momentum when there's very little interaction. And everything that I've done as Sun Ra Archive online up until now, the interaction is just very low. And when COVID hit, as someone who did college radio and loves radio, I had always meant to do a Sun Ra podcast, because I love podcasts. Love broadcasting, but I always approached it with a kind of like expert professional mentality that if I was going to do something, it needed to be perfectly produced, it needed to sound great. And getting back to what I was saying earlier, that it was about more about the end product than the journey, which is a mistake, because what it means is that you end up waiting and waiting and waiting for perfection. It never comes, and you end up withholding um, information and slowing kind of the cycle and the flow of energy and things. So I did the podcast when COVID hit because I had time. There was a lot of solitary time. It was a time when we were all getting online with the topics and things we loved and kind of forming communities. And I did, I don't know, maybe 8 episodes or so a few years ago, which I think are excellent. They're great subject matter. So the way I approached it was as a proof of concept, instead of going after the band as interviews, Marshall and Michael Ray and all those people, I would talk to fellow researchers and scholars and authors who I admired who was doing similar work in the community and talk to them about their projects and what they were doing and what their experiences were, to kind of show the level of Sun Ra scholarship, bring the community get together, talk to people I admired like Robert Campbell, um, John Corbett, Bergen Matthews, etc., to kind of show where I was coming from, what the spirit was of this thing, and hope that after a few episodes we would gather an audience and show the greater world of the Sun Ra fans, but also the band, the performers, um, the record label owners, etc., that this was legit, that it was conscientious, that it had a good intent, and that I could start going after maybe more high profile interviews. And that just didn't happen. Um, the listenership was pretty low, as far as sustaining any kind of momentum to keep it going. So that kind of ended up after that first batch just sitting out there. And I encourage you to go to YouTube where they're all archived and listen to the Sun Ra Archive podcast, because there's some great content from our guests and great shared knowledge. But it kind of shows the evolution of this where how we got to this live stream here, which is when I have these phases and I'm feeling a phase coming on, and it always happens around the holidays and vacation time, where I can kind of take a breath and get into Sun Ra and really go a little bit deep, which is the way I like to go. How can I do it different this time and maybe share the journey as opposed to share the journey as it's happening, as opposed to presenting it after it's figured out and professionally produced, especially in a nonprofit social realm. There's really no point in spending all of the energy and time doing that, because it just, you can't sustain it. It takes time and money to do those things. We all have lives. I've got a family and friends and a full-time job, and um, I'm never gonna, Sun Ra's never gonna have the fan base, and I'm never gonna be the person that's gonna be a full-time Sun Ra researcher that can sustain themselves on that. So I thought, well, live stream, right? Um, got some time coming up. This technology's here. There are some other content providers like the Paulcast, who I really enjoy watching on a weekly basis, who, even though we've never met, I feel very close to, and they have a very educational spirit as well, where they're open, they're positive, they're happy, they're not claiming any ownership, and they've managed to bring a community together around a subject matter that I really took a cue from. And I thought, okay, our numbers here in Sun Ra Land will probably be smaller, but maybe the live streams is a good way to kind of share the journey of learning and research and get all of you involved and start a dialogue, learn from each other, without having to do these major productions, right? So like the podcast, the first episode, I spent probably a good 80 or 100 hours editing it. And even though it was low production investment as far as money, I ended up putting in a lot of time making it just exactly as perfect as I could be with my means of capture and editing and presenting the people in the best light. Something in, you know, thinking about Esoteric Sun Ra compositions, what inspired him, what was the thought process, the creative process. Maybe live streaming might be a way to do that. So I did a test yesterday, just to see what the free live no frills YouTube platform might offer. And I just got back from the walk with the dog, sat and thought about it for a little while, and just decided I'd hop on here unscripted, and just not worry about what my hair looks like, what the lighting is, um, whether there's anyone else out there, and just leave the test from yesterday up and have this be a journey. See who finds it, see who's interested, who wants to get involved, who wants to talk, and if this has any value. Not just maybe from a me documenting my thought process and research standpoint, but from a community standpoint, if it resonates with any of you and it's something you want to get together and talk about. I've kind of put these calls to action out before. If nothing happens with it, fair enough. Nothing lost. We'll try it a couple times. We'll see if it evolves. We'll see if I need to step it up. See if anybody wants to get on, hop on and talk. And we'll just take it from there like that. So that's what the intention of this is. And I've already gone a half an hour with the backstory and the thought process. And I'm going to try and control myself and keep it as succinct as possible. But what you see is what you get. This is how I think. This is how I process. And I'm going to try to be conscious of that, but I'm just going to share it with you as it comes out, and not worry about it too much. Leave it out there and see what happens with it. And I sincerely hope the intent is that it's of help and use to you. That's all it's about. And with love and respect and gratitude to Sun Ra and the Sun Ra Arkestra, Marshall Allen, Elson, the band, everyone that's still here on this plane doing it, keeping the music going forward, trying to bring a better reality and destiny to humanity through music. The absolute greatest vibrational healing force that I'm aware of. So that's that. And Paul, Worthy McDon, thank you for being there in the chat, joining me. Any thoughts? By all means, please. I'm all ears. Please, everyone, be constructive with your thoughts. This is an open forum. It's open to you as well. And we're just going to kind of take it from there. So today, I'm not going to get too much into maybe what we'll deep dive in, but maybe I'll just set it up and kind of tell you why I hopped on and what I thought this live stream could help do. So, as I kind of curate my personal library of music and stuff over the years, I try and condense it and organize it so that I have it at easy recall within reach as much as possible, which is really hard with Sun Ra because there's thousands of recordings and hundreds of songs and many, many books and things like that. But I pulled the digital files of the music that I have collected over the years that I listen to, for my own personal use. And I was thinking about the Esoteric and Sun Ra. So from the very earliest recording of Sun Ra that I have along these lines, which is 1948, and a song called The Darkness Within from the Eternal Myth box set curated by Michael Anderson and released on the Transparency label, all the way through to the end of the 50s, early 60s. I kind of pulled all of the tracks that had song titles keeping with the esoteric theme. So I went up into November 10th of 1961 and the Futuristic Sounds of Sun Ra album, which Craft Recordings just re-released this fall in a 60th anniversary edition, digitally on compact disc and on vinyl. And the vinyl, and I think the source recording that the CD was made from, got an all new, all analog cut by Kevin Gray, who is a very well respected, conscientious, high quality mastering engineer. So, kind of, I pulled all of the tunes from 1948 to 1961 that fit into this parameter, with the idea of kind of going through them and curating them down, figuring out which ones really dealt with topics of inner space, outer space, ancient civilizations, ancient knowledge, um, esoteric or occult or biblical themes, etc., to kind of see what I found through it. So let's see here. So from 48 to 1961, with the first kind of blush, the first cut of those tunes, got 183 tunes here that I'm going to go through. Maybe we'll go through together to start to chart how Sun Ra introduced these ideas into his compositions and music. When it happened, how it happened, the evolution of these subject matters. Were there periods where he was introducing outer space themes? How did they correspond to popular culture or the space race? When he was talking about ancient civilizations, India, Egypt, lost civilizations like Atlantis, Lemuria, when and how did that happen? And are there any cues in the song titles that would kind of talk about his spiritual, esoteric knowledge development, to try and dig a little deeper in that respect, but then also to start researching on some of these topics and look at the origin of the words, the concepts, in history, in writings and teachings, and see if by researching those topics, what we could learn or what I could learn from them. And a great example is the early 80s, 82, I believe, album, A Fireside Chat with Lucifer, which always intrigued me. And I hear the dog barking, and we'll leave it at that. So, A Fireside Chat with Lucifer, if you haven't heard that one. There are some intriguing song titles and things I didn't know anything about, but these song titles made me start doing research and looking deeper into Sun Ra. And maybe that's what we'll do on a future stream. So, just kind of teeing up the concept, trying out, getting my legs with the technology, and seeing where your appetite is at. And we'll leave it there for now. And be well. Have a wonderful holiday. Wishing peace, happiness, prosperity, and health to you, to your family, and to all beings.